Hey there, and welcome back to Blueprints for Better Benefits. If you're a business leader staring at another double digit health insurance renewal, wondering how something so critical to your employees keeps getting more expensive, more complex, and somehow less human every year, you're not alone. This podcast exists for one reason: to help employers climb out of that system. Think of the journey to a smarter health plan like climbing a mountain. At the base, everything looks overwhelming: confusing contracts, rising premiums, carrier jargon, and a lot of advisors telling you the climb is just too dangerous. But the truth is, thousands of companies have already reached that summit. What most employers are missing isn't the opportunity, and it's the guide. That's where this show comes in. Each episode, we break down the strategies, structures, and decisions that help employers take control of their health plans one step at a time. And joining me, as always, is the person who has spent decades guiding companies through this climb. He's the founder of Triforta, a benefit strategist who has helped employers across industries rethink how their health plans work, and someone who has been and seen the system from every angle. My father, Rodney Mattos Sr. And today we're pulling back the curtain on something many brokers and consultants won't talk about. And that real reason is your fully insured health plan hasn't changed, even when it should have. And it's not because better options don't exist. It's not because your company is too small. And it's definitely not because your industry can't do it. More often than not, it's because the advisor guiding the climb is tied up on the very system keeping you stuck at the base camp. So today we're going to unpack the bottleneck quietly costing employers millions and what leaders can do to move beyond it. So let's start with this. If self-funding or a captive structure is clearly better in so many cases, why are most brokers still pushing fully insured plans?
Hey, Junior. Yep. Absolutely great question. It usually comes down to two things: money and habit. Fully insured carriers pay brokers commissions. They pay them overrides, an incentive tied directly to premium volume, which means the more your premium increases, the more they get paid.
So they're financially rewarded for not saving the employer money?
Yeah, exactly. And these bonuses aren't small either. There's carrier overrides, contingency bonuses, retention incentives. Some of these are worth 6 or 7 figures to larger firms. And here's the kicker: you, the employer, rarely ever see the disclosures.
So let's get personal. When you were a producer, did you see this conflict firsthand?
Yeah, absolutely. Early in my career, I remember sitting, they have all these incentive trips and they do these broker advisory meetings. And I remember sitting in a carrier sponsored golf outing. They take you to the nicest places because they can afford to. And incentive dinners where the unspoken rule was keep the client happy, but keep the premiums flowing. I once lost a client because I recommended a self-funded model that would have saved them hundreds of thousands of dollars just in year one alone. Their current broker convinced them it was too risky, even though he had never read the plan document.
That sounds painful.
It is. And here's the reality. Many brokers are employed by firms that are either publicly traded or private equity backed. There's been so much roll up and so much consolidation in the industry. And they report to shareholders now, not their clients. So their job is to hit revenue targets, not necessarily find what's in the best interest for their client.
Yeah, so we're not just talking about bad advice. We're talking about misaligned incentives baked into the entire business model.
Yeah, that's right. Publicly traded brokerage has a fiduciary duty to their shareholders. And, that's how it works in publicly traded companies when their, stock portfolios need to be reported quarter after quarter, and they're expected for those to, have increases. And that means increasing revenue quarter over quarter. In many cases, they're incentivized to retain premium with fully insured carriers because of the significant overrides and bonus tiers that they are now achieving. And so they don't want to give up the golden goose.
Right. And that creates a loyalty triangle too. So brokers work for the carrier, not the client necessarily.
And that triangle isn't just theoretical, it's financial. Brokers may say they work for the employer, but when the vast majority of their compensation comes from insurance carriers, their true allegiance, it starts to tilt, not out of malice, but out of inertia, convenience, and those incentives. They just pile up. So let's break it down a little bit. They get base commissions for placing fully insured plans. Then come the override bonuses. the retention bonuses, the persistency incentives, the relationship trips, and performance dinners, all paid by the carrier. So this creates allegiance, this creates loyalty, this creates guilt. So when it's time to market your plan, is the broker truly incentivized to push for adoption? The funding model that cuts the carrier out of the equation? Yeah, rarely. What happens, we've seen brokers submit a handful of RFPs to same names they always use, the blue carriers, Blue Cross, United, maybe Cigna and Aetna, but they avoid self-funded options. They skip the captives completely, and they never disclose the rebate spreads or the shared savings kickbacks. Why? Because those don't pay them the same way. So even when the fully insured renewal comes back with a 12% increase, they still frame it as, not that bad, and try to move on. You as the employer, you stay stuck. They stay silent, and the carrier laughs all the way to the bank. So here's the gut check. If your broker stands to lose compensation by moving you into a lower cost funding model, they're not your advisor. They're just a reseller. And that's where the loyalty triangle becomes a trap, because you think they work for you, but their paycheck tells a completely different story.
So if I'm an employer listening to this, how do I know if my broker is part of the problem?
Well, the first thing to do is look for the symptoms. If they talk in generalities about rising costs, but never give you real claims data, they show you 3 fully insured renewal quotes, but say self-funding, it's too complex. They claim they've shopped the market, but won't show you pharmacy repricing. You never hear about strategy or strategic captives or cost containment vendors. And if your broker seems more loyal to United Healthcare or Aetna than your balance sheet, you've got a bottleneck.
Yeah, and that bottleneck could cost a mid-sized employer hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions over a few years.
Yeah, every single time. It's what I call the silent margin loss. The kind that doesn't show up as an item on your P&L, but it's there. It's lurking in the shadows. And here's an example of how it happens. So say you've got 150 employees and you're spending, $2.5 million a year on your health insurance premiums. Broker delivers a renewal increase, not that uncommon, but it's 10% increase. And that's another $250,000 tacked onto your budget. They shop the market, kind of, right? Same 4 carriers, same spreadsheet, maybe one alternative quote that's barely different. And you don't see any captives. You don't see any self-funded options or modeling on cost savings. You see no stop loss modeling, no repricing analysis. And they say, hey, good news. I negotiated that 10% increase down to 6 or 7%. 7%, that's still $175,000 in extra cost. And it could have been avoided altogether, right? So now imagine that every year for 3 years, 5 years, even 10 years, and you're talking millions in unnecessary spend. For a plan design, your employees still hate, and a network they barely use. That's the bottleneck, right? It's the silent erosion of capital that could have been reinvested into your people, your company's growth, and your mission. And the kicker, this is what really gets me, the broker still gets paid more as your costs go up.
This segment is brought to you by the people and platforms that make this show possible. First, Triforta. If you're an employer who's tired of runaway renewals, bloated, fully insured plans, and the feeling that your benefit strategy is working against you instead of for you, then hear us clearly. You do not have to play that game anymore. Help business owners fix broken health insurance. We bring cost containment strategies, self-funded captives, data intelligence, and real-world case studies that routinely save employers 6 and 7 figures without cutting benefits. If you want a benefits plan that actually rewards results, visit Triforta.com and download our blueprints for better benefits. And second, Aperionics. If you run an insurance agency and you're still drowning in manual quoting, data entry, or commission reconciliation, you're leaving more than time on the table. You're leaving money. Aperionics is the automation layer built by insurance people for insurance people. AI quoting for carriers that don't have APIs. Instant policy data extraction, commission statement automation, proposal generation in seconds, not hours. Aperionics reduces operating costs and gives teams their time back so they can work at the top of their license. Learn more at aperionics.com. That's APEIRONIX.com. Triforta and Aperionics, 2 companies, 1 united mission. Fix what's broken, elevate what's possible, and help real people thrive. Now let's get back to the show. So let's pause here for a second, because a lot of employers hesitate to make a change even when they see the writing on the wall.
Yeah, I get that. The reality is these are personal relationships.
Yeah.
It could be a neighbor, Could be a college buddy, golf buddy, you know, a family member. It's a lot of different reasons why there's that loyalty. But let me put it in terms every employer understands. So imagine your controller in your organization came to you and said, "Hey, I know expenses are up, 18 to 20% this year. Can't really tell you why. I don't have line item details, but trust me, it's working conditions." How long does that controller keep their job? You wouldn't accept blind accounting in your business, but that's exactly what most employers are accepting in their health plan from their current advisors. Another analogy I have, I'll give you this one. It relates a lot to the mining operators we work with in the Great Basin of Nevada and adjacent states. If a piece of equipment on your site, and these are expensive pieces of equipment, heavy machinery, if it kept breaking down every month, the same issue, and the vendor kept saying, well, heavy equipment is expensive. That's just the cost of doing business. At some point, you'd say, no, either fix the cause, the mechanical issue, or you're out.
Right.
So you wouldn't put up with that. So healthcare is the only major expense where employers tolerate recurring failure with no root cause analysis.
Yeah, and those are good points, right? We see it all the time in benefits. There's a strange loyalty trap where employers are more afraid of hurting someone's feelings than protecting their bottom line. But this isn't just another vendor. This is someone advising you on how to spend millions of dollars a year on your people, on their health, on their families. I mean, you wouldn't keep a CPA who couldn't explain your tax strategy. You wouldn't stick with a contractor who left leaks in the roof. So why do we give benefits advisors a pass, especially when they keep backing the same broken model? It's not about being cold, it's about being courageous. And sometimes the bravest thing a leadership team can do is say, we owe our people better than this.
No, I mean, that's the reality of, I think, painful cycle. And you're absolutely right. Look, this isn't about burning bridges. It's about protecting your people and protecting your business. And if your broker's priorities aren't aligned with yours, that's not a partnership. That becomes a liability.
Yeah, and let's give our listeners something tangible. So if someone wants to evaluate their current insurance broker or advisor, what should they be asking?
Yeah, we put together a simple audit checklist, and we have that as a takeaway and a downloadable asset for anybody listening to this show. But first thing I can say is one of the most important things is you're going to see very clearly. Ask for a 3-year commission and override disclosure. Request a side-by-side model of fully insured versus self-funded plans and options, and ask how they benchmark pharmacy spend. Real data, not carrier reports. Request a sample of plan document strategy. How would they structure your SPD? And ask who they use for actuarial support and underwriting. Ask what captives they placed employers with and which ones they placed them into and why. And ask how they handle stop-loss negotiations. Ask for some case studies or client stories. And ask one very important question, if they're PE-backed or publicly traded. Ask who their fiduciary loyal to really is.
And that last one, it might sting a little bit.
Yeah, it should, because once you understand the incentive structure, you start to see the cracks. So if your broker works for a firm that reports to private equity investors or Wall Street, then they're not just serving you, they're serving their shareholders. And that means pushing high margin carrier contracts, inflating revenue through overrides, and hitting quarterly targets, often at their client's expense. So let me give you a real world example. We sat down with an employer last year. They had 300 employees, paying nearly $4 million a year in premiums. Their advisor was from a well-known national brokerage. They're publicly traded, a big brand name. If I said the name, everybody would know exactly who I'm talking about. And when we ask what they hadn't explored, or when we ask why they hadn't explored self-funding or a captive, the broker said, well, we looked into it, didn't pencil out. No documentation, no models, no alternatives. Just trust me. We ran the numbers. Yeah. They were overpaying by nearly $900,000. Why? Because the advisor's comp model paid them more. The more they spent, the more the client spent, and their firm had a bonus structure directly tied to fully insured placement targets. So that's not advice. That's a sales quota in a suit.
If you're an employer, ask those questions. Ask who's paying them. Ask what incentives they're chasing, and ask how many plans they actually moved into a captive last year, or if they're just here to dabble. Because Loyalty, it isn't just a vibe, it's a contract. And if your broker's allegiance is split between you and the carrier, or between what's best and what's easiest, the one holding the bag is usually you. So you pay the premiums, you carry the risk, you face the employees when things break. So you deserve a partner who puts your name first, not just on the slide deck, but in every decision, every strategy, and every negotiation. And that's not too much to ask. That's the bare minimum for a modern advisor. And this is where we separate the consultants from the commission chasers. So who does your broker really work for is what we're trying to figure out here, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, you said it eloquently. And I'll just add this, if they're paid based on premium volume and carrier bonuses, bottom line is they work for the carrier. If they answer to a private equity board more than your leadership team, they work for their shareholders. And if they hesitate to challenge the system that's failing you because it might jeopardize their override, then you already have your answer. But a real advisor, the kind that walks the walk, works for you. They disclose every dollar they earn. They structure their compensation as a flat fee, not a percentage of premium. And they win when you win, sometimes even tying their income to your plan's savings performance through a shared savings agreement. That kind of alignment changes everything. Now your advisor is motivated to reduce waste, not increase spend. They're motivated to optimize the plan, not push the path of least resistance. And they're motivated to advocate for your employees, not protect relationships with underwriters at the carriers.
And that's the crux, right? When someone's income is tied to your performance, your outcomes, they become a strategic partner, not a passenger, not a gatekeeper, but someone who's just as invested in your plan success as you are.
Yeah, we've seen it play out time and time again. The employer was told, you can't self-fund, it's too risky, until a fee-based advisor helped him cut $750,000 in waste. The HR leader who thought our network is fine until a transparent TPA saved an employee $35,000 on a single surgery. Or the CFO who asked the tough questions and realized their loyalty had been bought by a bonus check.
So go ahead and ask, do you work for me or do you work for the machine? Because if your broker's priorities are misaligned, your plan's performance will be too. And the cost, it isn't just financial, it's cultural, it's strategic, and also, most importantly, it's personal. So if today's episode hit a nerve, that's good. That means you're paying attention, because this conversation was never about calling out bad brokers. It's about helping employers finally see the system for what it is: a structure built on opacity, misaligned incentives, and comfort within the status quo. And here's the truth most people don't tell you. Fully insured isn't your final destination. It's not the X on the map, it's just the starting point. And the moment you step into a self-funded or a captive model, something begins to change. You gain access to data, real transparency, real strategy, and also, most importantly, real leverage. And then when the work actually begins, that's when everything starts to happen. The work to measure what's happening inside your plan, to manage cost drivers instead of reacting to them once a year, and to improve outcomes not just for your balance sheet, but for your people. That's what we're building here at Triforta. And that's essentially what this podcast is all about. So if this episode made you think differently or confirmed what you've already been feeling, the next step doesn't have to be dramatic. It can start with a conversation. Visit us at triforta.com to learn more, explore the tools we're building, and see how employers just like you are taking back control of their benefits. And until next time, keep asking better questions, keep challenging the status quo, and keep building blueprints for better benefits. And we'll see you next time. Take care.